Oscar Bevis, IFL TV, proudly sponsored by Everlast. Delighted to be joined by the Burmese Python, Nicola Bart. Nicola, thank you very much for joining me. How are we?
Very good, thank you. Always a pleasure.
No, it's our pleasure to have you on today. Now, I've told you this, right? I'm not the most knowledgeable on the combat sports outside of boxing, so you are going to have to help me. I've got a minute knowledge of mixed martial arts. So I'm going to introduce you as this, right? You are a kickboxer, ranked #1 in the UK. You are ranked #1 in the world. Yes, the world, in Taekwondo. And this is the one that spins my head a bit. #2 in left weight. Now, I ain't got a clue what that is, but that's a serious fighting regimen.
Yeah, so left weight is really quite a brutal sport. It's also known as Burmese boxing, and the rule set allows punches, kicks, knees, elbows, headbutts, and it's all with no gloves. So yeah, ranked world #2 to that, and that's like really quite raw and brutal in terms of, well, I mean, just the rule set itself is pretty atrocious, but I mean, that's like the purest, rawest form of fighting that I've ever done as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're looking to get into boxing, which is obviously something we'll talk about later on. But just before we jump into that and where you are now, we might as well take it back a little bit. What sort of the origins of why you love fighting? Did that come as a young child?
So why I love fighting? You know, I actually started off in ballet as a kid, and I just couldn't dance for the life of me. And I did it for about like 14, 15 years. And it literally took that long for me to have the courage to tell my parents, like, Mum, Dad, look, this isn't for me. I don't enjoy dancing. I'm not particularly good at it. And it was just the child logic at the time. You know, if I'm terrible at ballet, like, no problem. I'm probably good at something else. And the most opposite sports I could think of was sort of combat martial arts. And that's why I first moved into Taekwondo and started my martial arts journey there. And it was from that I just ended up completely falling in love with martial arts as a whole, you know, whatever the discipline.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're not any good at ballet, is it just logic to just go the complete opposite way as a child? It was literally nothing in between. Like, it's ballet, it's mixed martial arts.
Hopeless optimist, you know, hopeless optimist.
Well, I know, I read as a child that you had narcolepsy, which is obviously, well, I don't know, but an incredibly difficult thing to live with, I imagine. So having narcolepsy with mixed martial arts as well and Taekwondo, etc. I don't know, it doesn't seem like something that molds together quite well.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, so growing up with narcolepsy, so for those who aren't familiar, it's just like a sleeping disorder where your brain just automatically switches off. And it wouldn't just be like at night time, it'd be during the middle of the day or even the middle of a conversation. I'd just be out and I wouldn't know it's coming, so I'd never be able to prepare. But it was weird. Through doing martial arts, I had fewer and fewer episodes, to the point that by the time I'd finished university, sort of next to no narcoleptic episodes, which I mean is a great thing, because otherwise, you know, it would be pretty big battle in the ring if your opponent's just fallen asleep in front of you. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously sounds incredibly difficult. And then, I don't know, that's so weird, because I can imagine as a kid you had so many appointments and sessions about trying to deal with that. And then, so almost, not it was solved by doing mixed martial arts, but I don't know, like, I don't know how that's...
No, me either, to be honest, but you're right. I literally spent most of the time at the hospital, because at the time people didn't even know that much about narcolepsy. And I remember the doctor saying to my parents, like, oh, we just want to open up her brain, have a little look. And they were like, yeah, but you're going to do anything? And they were like, no, we're just going to look. And my parents were like, no, like, well, don't open up her brain then. We don't want that. But yeah, I don't know, it almost became a bit of a game. And I remember my sister and friends really enjoyed, like, me having narcoleptic episodes, because they just thought it'd be like, that'd be the time to get like big sis back, you know, like, you know, you just have quarrels as kids, and she'd be like, when you're asleep, you watch it, I'm gonna come for you. And then I'd wake up in like the most like dressed up in like random things, or, you know, they've made me a princess, and I'd wake up in like all of this gear and be like, what have they done?
That was me thinking they'd be looking after you.
Oh, no, not at all. Brutal, savage, yeah.
So it's obviously, you had that whole thing and then started in the mixed martial arts at first. What's it like trying to sort of forge a more professional career out of it? Because we know in boxing you go through an amateur system, and some people get drafted into GB if you're sort of the right profile and you've got the right skill set, and then you go onto the podium squad. And we've seen that career path for so many fighters now. Anthony Joshua took it. It's pretty simple. But I don't know, is there that sort of amateur setup for these taekwondo and kickboxing communities?
It's not. So I'd say that's the key difference moving in, that boxing is just so much more professional. It's so much more thorough. As you say, there's a clear pathway. With kickboxing, Muay Thai, sometimes you don't know who you're matched up with. And because it's quite common for fighters to mix between disciplines, you might be given one record, but it might just be their MMA record, or it could just be their Thai boxing record. You never get the complete picture of who your fighting is. So it's definitely a lot more difficult, and it's very much about getting yourself on the right shows, the right exposure, and having opportunities abroad. I'd say that's maybe, if we're sort of balancing them out, boxing definitely a more rigid pathway, but with kickboxing and Thai boxing, you've definitely had more opportunity to sort of travel the world, especially like early on in your career as well, and to be able to fight abroad quite a lot, which is it's quite nice, and it just helps prepare you for bigger things in the future too.
Yeah, and with the sort of professional side of things, and obviously I'd said what rankings you were at the start. One of them's #1 in the UK, #1 in the world, etc., and things like that. Is it a full-time job at that point? Because obviously if you are a world champion in boxing, you are a full-time professional. Is it a full-time professional when you're at the top of the taekwondo ranks?
No, not at all. So I actually work full-time alongside martial arts. Like full-time? Even now doing like moving into professional, I work full-time for HSBC. And like project management, so something totally unrelated. And it's just, if you want something that bad, and I think it'll be a common theme with a lot of fighters, that you just make it happen. And at the moment, in still sort of building myself up and having enough sponsors, I have to sponsor myself. So working full-time is the way that I manage to do it, but it is a bit brutal. It's like wake up, work in the morning, go off to training, come back home, like quick change, feel like Superwoman some days, back to work, back to training in the evening, and then work again. And then, that is it, 5 days a week. So I'm grateful that work's flexible, but it's definitely a lot to juggle.
When you see people go in the bank and they have an argument with one of the branch managers, or saying, don't pick an argument. Don't pick an argument with a Burmese python when you're in the bank. I say that. So obviously I said that you sort of got like a draw to boxing. Is it quite an obvious draw? Let's be honest, boxing is the biggest, most well-paid and most covered form of combat sport. And if you're good, well, very good, exceptional at the sports you're good at, you obviously have some form of carryover skill. Is it pretty clear to see for everyone why you would take to boxing as well?
Yeah, and I'm also, ready for a new challenge as well. With the Lethwei, the Burmese bare knuckle boxing, ideally I would have liked to get to world #1, but with everything they've got going over in Burma at the moment with the military coup, and it's just not feasible to do that. So there had to be some sort of change of action, or change of plan. And so the most sensible thing made sense to move into professional boxing. And it's been really interesting. Like there's a lot of things that carry over which support the professional boxing really well, and then there's other bits where it's okay, we need to change this a little bit because the fighting styles are naturally very different.
Yeah, I do want to quickly come on to the Burma stuff actually before we talk about where you want to go with a boxing journey, because you mentioned that it's quite hard in Burma at the moment with what's going on. I'm not too well informed on that, if I'm honest, but first let's talk about the nickname. So I was guessing it's because your family have Burmese origins, of course.
Yeah, so my mum was born in Burma, and so it represents her heritage. I'm so proud to be Burmese and have that bloodline in me, and to be able to represent the country as well. So that's the first part. And then the second bit, Python, depicts more my fight style, sort of fearless and aggressive, courageous. And I think, anyone who's going to fight like Lethwei rules, like hats off to them. It's one thing watching it, sitting at home, thinking like, I could do that, to then actually being in the warm-up room and looking at my coach and just being like, mouth guard. And he's like, yeah, that's all you need. And I'm literally like, awful. Like now it's sunk in like how serious this is. Like the only thing like protective wise is a mouth guard. You know, that's when it really sunk in. And I was like, did no one tell me that I was like insane? And they were like, yeah, everyone. I was like, don't believe this. Don't remember one conversation. So yeah, that's like sort of the Python style.
Well, it's not forgettable. It is one of the coolest nicknames I've heard. Quickly on that Lethwei stuff as well. I saw a little bit. I can't remember his name. You might know. He's a well-known male Lethwei fighter, and he done a bit on Joe Rogan. And I saw it, and I've watched a bit of the action. And if you ain't seen it, watch it on YouTube. Yes, that's it. Yeah. If you haven't seen it, watch it because it's actually quite horrible. I'm not gonna lie. It's quite horrific.
Cool. And he'll show you how to throw like a proper headbutt as well, because that's something you also have to practice. And it sounds really bizarre, like how do you practice a headbutt? But like after all the laughter, you do practice it on a pad, on a bag, like you would a punch, which is like very weird to get your head around for someone to be like, you know, tapping a pad and they're like headbutt, and you're like, okay. Yeah, I mean, like you have to enjoy it along the way, and I think that's what's always excited me is that, okay, yeah, it is quite scary, but at the same time, like, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is absolute madness. And you talk about, so you can't, well, it's difficult to go back to Burma at the moment because there's, was it a military coup going on in Burma? So it's just not feasible, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally. I mean, if you go to Burma, you probably won't be let out at the moment. So yeah, it's really not advised, which is a shame, you know. And yeah, the people over there, they're literally just fighting for like democracy, let alone anything more than that. And you know, it really just puts in perspective how lucky we are when we think we have a lot of problems, but then you see everyone else's and you're like, actually, I'll take my problems back, because in the grand scheme of things, there's like so much more important, bigger things that people are fighting for.
Yeah. Well, see, that brings us towards the path of boxing. It's growing at the moment. We know that. And obviously people bang on all the time about young girls need role models to want them to get involved in something. Can you see that at the moment with the current crop of females and looking from the outside before you take to professional boxing? Can you see why it's a bigger draw at the moment and that the current crop are perhaps encouraging people and younger people as well to get involved?
Yeah, definitely. I just think it's a genuinely fantastic thing. I know as a little girl growing up, you'd look up and if you think about the key sports, they were all sort of very male dominated, that you didn't even have the seed planted as a kid to be like, oh, that could be me one day, you know, because it was so much like, no, you're a girl, you should dance, or you should be able to dance. And it's great to see that they're building it out, and there aren't, you know, they're breaking all the female stereotypes. You know, it's not going to be like someone who's really butch. They can still be feminine and also be an like absolutely lethal fighter. So yeah, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. And as for you taking to boxing, you are making your debut in 2 weeks. It's come around sooner than I thought. I thought we was going to chat about you sort of slowly making the move, but you've got the license, everything's in order. In 2 weeks, you're in the ring.
Yeah, all ready and sorted, no messing about. So 2 weeks, yeah, 2 weeks I'll be making my debut, which I'm really excited about. It's just been such a journey as well. There's just so much to learn, and it's just been incredibly exciting to just feel like a sponge and almost a white belt at some points, to be able to take on all the new knowledge. And I think that's, you know, for me, that's part of the love, the passion just for martial arts as a whole, is that it is such a science at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, you say about you feeling like a white belt. Would you almost call yourself like a novice turning pro? Maybe perhaps not a novice because of your fighting background, but when you look at some of the mixed martial arts fighters who take to boxing, a lot of the ones who do well have got a good stand-up game. I mean, they're good punchers, essentially, and then you've got ones who are more wrestlers and that. So I suppose focusing more on one department, do you almost feel like when you're learning, you feel like a bit of a novice?
Definitely with the boys that I train with, you know, like they're English champion, Southern Area champion, that they're like at the top of the game. So I always feel, yeah, I do feel like a novice, but I think that's important, you know. I've always said from a gym and from like my training team, like I never want to be the best in the room. So to always feel like I have the opportunity to learn from absolutely everyone, you know, I just think that's like the perfect environment to grow and to develop. And I don't know, it always makes me chuckle. Like I'll know I start getting like good when I'm started to use for demonstrations, because you know that you're you know you're not the favorite if they're not like, well, usually for demonstrations they're still sort of figuring out the flow. So that's like my little internal chuckle which I have. So yeah, I would, oh yeah, definitely.
Do you know what I do? I like the fact that you said you don't want to be the best in the room. I've never heard anyone say that. I like that. It makes sense.
Yeah, and you know what? I found that quite quickly in Thai boxing, Taekwondo, because the pool's so much smaller. And I literally got to the point where it's like, okay, yeah, it's a training session, but I don't feel like I'm learning anything anymore. And I just wanted to be surrounded by people who are so much better. So to have this now in boxing, to me, that's like a dream come true. It's like all I've been wishing for, because now I just know I'll always be learning. And I don't think I valued that until I'd gone through that process, but I do think it's super important.
Yeah. And you mentioned some Southern area and English champions. Throw some names at me. I want to know you're training alongside.
Oh, yeah. So, no, I train with Lionel Chidofia, Brad Pauls, under Terry Stewart. So I think they're both fighting soon as well, which is really exciting. Like, there's such a good buzz in the gym at the moment. So I absolutely love it.
Linus is my boy. Linus
Is
is
he
my
your
boy. Yeah. I love Linus. I didn't actually ask you this at the start. I take it you're like now, well, you're from Luton, you're based in Luton then.
Yeah, I'm from
Yeah,
Luton.
yeah, Linus is my boy. I mean,
Yeah.
well, yeah, not a bad person to be about, and Brad Pauls as well, two top lads and top fighters. But yeah, man, that's cool. Linus is my boy. What are the details for the debut?
So it's on September the 18th over at the F6 Circus Tavern. And yeah, you can just drop me a message on Instagram, Facebook, wherever, at the Burmese Python. I can sort out tickets for anyone who wants to come support.